In labs across the world, researchers are probing the forbidden realms of science. Controversial experiments worthy of Dr. Frankenstein are happening right now.
We need more power.
All in preparation for the ultimate goal.
Wow! That's wonderful.
To bring the woolly mammoth back from the dead.
This is taking a sci-fi idea and bringing it into the lab.
When you tell someone, they always think back to Jurassic Park.
The discovery of a new mammoth, frozen in the Siberian tundra, has quickened the pace of the project. This mammoth is different. Not only is there preserved flesh that looks good enough to eat. As scientists probed the icy corpse, it started to bleed.
The fact that blood has been found, we could just sense the freshness of this mammoth.
In Siberia, leading scientists have gathered to conduct an historic autopsy to discover the story of her life.
That looks to me like she's calling out to us pretty loud and clear.
And death.
Animal died in very, very bad situation.
Yes.
And perhaps perform a miracle. Bring an animal back to life that died tens of thousands of years ago. Can they do it? Should they do it? And if herds of mammoths are brought back from the dead, what might it mean for our planet? May 2013. A team of scientists has made a 1,000-mile trip to the furthest reaches of northern Siberia. They'd heard of a mammoth preserved in the permafrost on far-flung Maly-Liakovsky Island.
They found two beautiful tusks poking out of the ground. Further investigation revealed there was actually much more there than just the ivory.
The scientists from the Siberian Northeastern Federal University were led by paleontologist Dr. Semyon Grigoriev. They had recovered the remains of mammoths before, but this one was different. As the team dug into the icy soil, they found something unexpected.
There was a lot of liquid that was coming out from the mammoth. It might be blood inside that liquid.
Mammoth blood is incredibly rare and has only been found in tiny dry specks before. Most mammoth mummies are compressed by the permafrost, their internal organs crushed and destroyed. But not this one.
So it was really quite spectacular. Parts of the animal are as well preserved, if not more well preserved, than any mammoth that we've had the privilege to study within the past century or two.
Despite being gnawed by predators, 3 legs, most of the body, some of the head, and even the trunk have survived. And the flesh looked almost as fresh as the day that the mammoth had died. And that's due to the ground it was buried in for millennia being permanently frozen.
The permafrost is very unique. It's able to preserve tissue in a very unique way.
In-sung Hwang, a cloning scientist from South Korea, understood the importance of the find.
When they were cutting into the flesh, it was really, really red. This is definitely one of the best samples people have ever found.
If the liquid was blood, the mammoth could be one of the freshest ever discovered. And its flesh could provide In-sung with the DNA needed for cloning. News of the discovery spread across the world. This mammoth seemed to offer the best chance of finding the DNA necessary to create a clone. And its unprecedented levels of preservation could also give scientists detailed insight into the mammoth's life and death. The mammoth hit the road. First stop, a coastal town called Kazachi, home of the tusk hunters. Then, after 6 months, to the capital, Yakutsk, the coldest city on Earth. The scientists who dug up the mammoth have called a symposium, inviting experts from across the world to examine the body. With the mammoth as it arrives is Dr. Tori Herridge from London's Natural History Museum.
I'm actually a bit overwhelmed. I saw pictures of it beforehand. It was quite hard to work out what I was looking at, and immediately now I can see it lying down, and you can see the very whole front leg, almost like it's the front leg of a horse pawing the ground. It's great.
Tori is a paleobiologist. She brings an in-depth knowledge of mammoth anatomy to the dissection.
It's a bit different to working on fossils. This is actually the toe of a mammoth. And then coming around the front, we're going up the foot and in to the lower arm, to the elbow down here. So the elbow is then joined up with the upper arm bone, the humerus, the funny bone, if you like, and we're all the way to the top here, where it would have attached to the scapula, the shoulder blade. And then in here, and all this stuff behind here, as you can see from the ribs, was part of the abdominal cavity. Coming back round again to the other side, this is the tooth of the lower jaw. This is the lower lip.
Despite their reputation for being enormous, this mammoth was not much larger than an Asian elephant.
I'm 1.70 meters, and so let's go up there somewhere.
Two of the world's top mammoth experts arrive at the autopsy. Professor Dan Fisher from the University of Michigan.
When we first saw the lips, the mouth, the neck, the general underside of the body, it was a magical experience.
And Professor Alexei Tikhonov from the Zoological Institute, St. Petersburg.
Такого мамонта еще не было, такой сохранности. Это уникальная совершенно находка именно по сохранности тканей, по сохранности клеточных структур.
With the mammoth on the slab under hot lights, the team has to work quickly. They only have 3 days to examine the body before it will have to be refrozen to prevent it rotting.
At the moment, everyone is in here trying to take their samples from the carcass whilst it's still frozen. Once the flesh is defrosted, the tissue may have degraded somewhat, so this is probably the best moment to sample things.
Today we go barbecue.
Yeah.
From mammoth to meat.
Pieces of the mammoth's flesh were carbon dated the previous summer. The analysis revealed that she walked the earth 40,000 years ago. Mammoths were perfectly adapted to extreme cold, thanks to millions of years of evolution. Their small ears, thick fur, 10 centimeters of body fat with an extra layer on the head, and even cold-adapted blood all helped them thrive. They were still around when the Great Pyramids of Egypt were built 4,500 years ago.
I think we all sense that we share a history with them. You can think back to the cave drawings in Europe, where clearly depiction of mammoths and their behavior was something that was deep, profoundly important.
Also present is geneticist In-Sung Huang and his team of cloning scientists. They're from a South Korean biotech company called Suam. Using techniques pioneered in the cloning of Dolly the sheep, they have perfected the cloning of livestock for farms and the pet dogs of the rich. They're the leading dog cloning outfit in the world. Now, Suam is funding a long-term project to try and bring the woolly mammoth back to life.
The mammoth died out a few thousand years ago, and some of the carcasses that are being found in Siberia these days, it gives you hope that one day you're going to be able to see the mammoth again.
In exchange for building the new lab at the university in Yakutsk, they have world-exclusive access to the DNA of new mammoths discovered by the university. But cloning living animals is one thing. Finding DNA in good enough condition to clone an extinct mammoth is quite another. Kazache, northern Siberia, the previous summer. The South Korean team hoped to get what they needed to clone the mammoth for the first time in history. The mammoth was stored in a permafrost cellar.
When we opened the doors, it just smelled like fish because it's where the fish is stored. We just made our way into the tunnel, and it just looked like a white piece of ice.
Present at the unveiling was In Sung's boss, Dr. Hwang Woo-suk, the first man to ever clone a dog. Hwang has been under scrutiny since he was found guilty in 2009 of falsifying the results of his human stem cell research. Hoping to move on from his 2-year suspended prison sentence, he has his sights set on the ultimate prize, cloning the mammoth.
Here it's going to be muscles and skin, and here it's some tendons. And by our experience, they look like very, very fresh. It's a place where blood leaking.
With the mammoth out in the open, the ice covering was removed. Dan and Alexei got a closer look at the body.
Upper forearm, elbow.
Her tusks were so big, at first they thought that she was a he.
I think very clearly, I was going to say small, but maybe just a medium-sized female.
85% that this is a female and 15% that this is a male.
To have any hope of cloning this mammoth, the Koreans need to find a cell with a complete nucleus containing an intact genome.
Yeah, I want to take samples. The color seems very good.
But DNA is very fragile. When an animal dies, its DNA normally breaks down very quickly. But if it was frozen immediately after death and stayed at roughly the same temperature over the ages, there is at least a theoretical possibility of finding an undamaged cell.
We couldn't use surgical knives because they were too small. So we just brought knives that we sterilized in alcohol and fire, and then we just carved into the mammoth skin and then extracted chunks of tissue.
The Korean team even took samples from its perfectly preserved trunk.
The tip of the trunk back this way.
Okay, it's very rare because even an elephant's trunk is one of the first part of the body, first parts of the carcass, which removed by predators, by scavengers. The same with mammoths here.
All effort is focused on finding just one cell that contains an intact genome. Seoul, South Korea. Suam labs await the arrival of the samples from Siberia.
Our colleagues are doing their best to really transport the samples to us as quickly as possible.
In the meantime, they focus on the cloning of farm animals and, not without controversy, pet dogs at $100,000 US a go.
The process that we're doing is basically copying the genetics of the original so that we can give birth to a clone that has the same genetic makeup.
They plan to clone the mammoth using the same process that they use for cloning dogs. To clone this beagle, they simply use a skin cell. It's painless and easy to remove, and its nucleus contains the DNA necessary to create a clone. They can even add a genetic marker to help identify any clones that are born. They need to put the cell into an empty egg.
So this is the step where we extract eggs out of the egg donor.
In a harmless procedure, eggs are removed from a sedated mongrel dog.
They're gonna flush the medium through the oviduct, and then the eggs come out the other way. Our researcher is working with the liquid that we just extracted from the oviduct of the domestic dog. And she's working with a very small mouth pipette. She can pick up the eggs among all the debris.
Next, the nucleus of the dog egg is identified under ultraviolet light and removed.
The nucleus would glow in blue. And then we just take out the nucleus and then replace it with a whole cell.
The beagle skin cell is then inserted into the dog egg.
You're removing the maternal side of the genes and then replacing it with a full genome from the skin cell.
The egg is given an electric shock. This kick-starts cell division and it turns into an embryo, which is inserted into the surrogate mother. Two months later, clone puppies are born. These two pups are exact copies of the original beagle, except for the proof that they're clones, their fluorescent toenails, a result of the marker added to the cell earlier.
As you can see on the paws, their nails are glowing in green right now. It's a visual marker that these are indeed clones.
But using these techniques to create a mammoth embryo and then implanting it into the womb of an Asian elephant will be highly controversial. Not all scientists think it's a good idea to clone a mammoth.
What are their intentions? What are they going to do if they're successful and they can clone a mammoth? Where will this mammoth live? What about the elephant that had to be pregnant with the baby mammoth for it to be born in the first place? Where is that elephant living right now? Is it in a laboratory situation? Is it in a zoo? How many elephants will you need to impregnate with a cloned mammoth embryo to get one successful live birth? Who is responsible for the mammoth that is produced? Is it them? Is it the wider world? Do we get a say in whether they're doing it in the first place?
Not all scientists support the idea. Conservation biologist Professor Kate Jones of University College London thinks concepts like cloning need careful handling.
We're facing a huge extinction crisis as it is, and we've got some species like the Javan rhino, which have only got 40 individuals left on this planet. Bringing back a mammoth is really cool, but when we're increasing in human population, we're converting the land as never before, the climate is changing around us. Is that really what we want to spend money on?
Evolutionary biologist Dr. Ben Collin thinks things are going too fast.
I don't think we've really thought through the consequences. We're thinking about the technology, that those things are being developed. It's plausible over the next sort of few years that we may get the technology to be able to do these things. Whether or not we should do that is for me a more fundamental question.
In Yakutsk, it's the second day of the autopsy. At last, the mammoth is beginning to thaw out. Now the autopsy can really get underway.
The room is pretty warm, and as the carcass warms up and as the tissue starts to thaw, then we're gonna get a whole lot more mammoth.
For Tori, the sight of her first flesh and blood mammoth being carved up is a difficult experience.
There is no way that I'd ever be able to take a drill that big to an upper arm bone of a mammoth. It was really hard to understand as a scientific specimen. It's not just for show or display, it's extraordinary and beautiful, but it's there to be sampled.
As the scientists probe deeper into the abdominal cavity, they find something strange. Mysterious objects within the mammoth's abdomen. They find more in the liver.
We've got the liver here. It's pretty big. And what we've found inside it is lots of these little strange hard balls that no one's quite sure what they are. We found them in the gut, in the liver, and we're all here a bit flummoxed. It's like the size of a gobstopper. You can really feel them, little hard lumps. They feel like the stones that we found in the intestines.
Don't think it's normal to have them in the liver.
Do the strange lumps indicate that the mammoth had a life plagued by disease? Someone who could shed more light on the mammoth's life story is tusk expert Professor Dan Fisher.
The thing that most excites me about mammoths is that they're animals that wear their life histories on their faces. These great tusks that emerge from mammoth skulls are in fact structures that form throughout their lives and record the details of their own growth history and the environments that they encountered during their life.
Dan gets wind of a powerful new scanner at a nearby hospital. But first, he has to figure out how to fit a mammoth tusk into a scanner made for humans.
Tusks are a little uncooperative with their geometry. The point is to get the tusk into a stable configuration so it doesn't move as it goes through the scanner.
Dan needs the scanner to pick up the subtle growth rings in the tusk.
These aren't the best scanning parameters. We need more power. We had a setting that was used for the femur.
No, this time we used the abdomen.
Okay, I think we need something more like for the femur.
Finally, Dan gets the results he is after.
That's getting better.
This is the sort of thing we're looking for. You can see here a concentric pattern of bright and darker zones. Each one of those represents 1 year in the animal's life.
It won't be until he gets the data back to his lab in Michigan that he will know whether the scans will tell him the mammoth's life story. In the autopsy room, Tori's getting the chance to examine something extremely rare.
In front of me, I have something really special.
The best preserved adult mammoth trunk ever found.
But what's really, really brilliant is that the most important end, the tip, is almost entirely complete.
Like the elephant, the mammoth's trunk is a marvel of evolution, capable of performing the most intricate tasks.
It's covered in almost all of its fur still. It's lovely. I mean, it's probably lost some of its longer hairs, but you can see this really thick, dense wool covering, which would have been the stuff that was a really great insulator, keeping it warm in those very icy cold conditions.
A trunk boasts over 40,000 individual muscles. And it could also out-sniff man's best friend.
An elephant's sense of smell is thought to be 5 times as good as a bloodhound's. It's possible that a mammoth, being a very close relative of the living elephants, had just as good a sense of smell.
For Tori, the trunk is an emotional connection to this mammoth that lived so long ago.
The mammoth's trunk is what it uses to interact with its environment, to pick up food for feeding, to caress its baby when it's suckling, to interact and reassure its friends and family. It looks like it's smiling at me.
But the team are puzzled. Were the lumps found in her stomach responsible for her death? They're on their way to unpicking the mystery of her life and discovering whether she can be brought back by cutting-edge science. It's the final day of the autopsy. The mammoth is fully thawed out. Professor Roy Weber of Aarhus University, Denmark, is an expert on mammoth biology. This is his last chance to find more of the strange liquid that astounded the world when the mammoth was discovered. If it is liquid blood, that would mean Roy could explore the mammoth's great evolutionary advantage: cold-resistant hemoglobin. Hemoglobin carries oxygen through the bloodstream. In humans, blood has to stay at a nearly constant temperature, even as it travels to the extremities. In mammoths, hemoglobin evolved to work at near freezing temperatures. This enabled them to survive harsh conditions with oxygen-rich blood flowing to their icy cold feet. Roy hopes that the liquid found near the body is indeed blood, and that there will be a lot more of it inside the carcass.
The ultimate aim for me as a physiologist is to find specifically how the hemoglobin is adapted to the environment in which the animals live. That temperature shift is very important to see how the blood can cope with dealing with a big difference in temperature and still function.
The trouble is, the mammoth seems to have run dry.
People have been going around sticking the syringe in different places, hoping to find something.
For another hole where we expect there should be blood vessels. So I hope that gives a better result.
They try again, probing the lowest parts of the mammoth's body, like the elbow.
Wow! It's better than I hoped.
Yeah.
Look at that. It's brownish, it's oxidized, but it seems to be real blood. I mean, looks wonderful.
Oh my God. You need it quickly. You need a bigger syringe. It's really exciting because with that amount of material, you can do all the analyses that you need to do to understand what that fluid is and what it contains.
At the new labs next door, they test the liquid for hemoglobin.
There's very clearly hemoglobin, although the concentration is very low.
Finding hemoglobin confirms that this is blood.
The red blood cells have completely been broken, and that's where the hemoglobin has been released.
This is the first time that large amounts of liquid mammoth blood have ever been found. Now Roy and his colleagues across the world can explore how the mammoth could survive the worst of Ice Age conditions. Although blood doesn't contain the DNA necessary for cloning, its presence is good news for the project.
The fact that blood has been found is just promising for us because it just tells us how good of a condition the mammoth was kept in for 43,000 years.
But even with the freshest mammoth ever found, finding an undamaged cell after such a length of time will be a major challenge. Growing a mammoth inside the womb of an elephant involves interspecies cloning. Many specialists doubted it was even possible. In Korea, Suam needed to prove their critics wrong.
In order to prove that interspecies cloning can work, we selected a species that's relatively close to the domestic dog. In this case, it was coyotes.
Could they successfully clone a coyote using a dog's egg?
Some people might say, what are you doing this sort of, Frankenstein work? But really our purpose was to sort of prove that these interspecies cloning technologies can be used in the future to possibly save endangered animals or reverse extinctions that have already occurred.
Using the same process as the dog-to-dog clone, they took skin cells from coyotes, inserted them into dogs' eggs, and put the growing eggs into a number of dog surrogates.
When I was watching a coyote being born from a domestic dog, it was an amazing experience.
8 coyote clone puppies of both sexes were born in summer 2011. But the true measure of a successful clone was whether it could breed.
They've naturally been able to breed together, the male clone and the female clone, to produce some of their own offspring.
The successful interspecies cloning of coyotes taught In-sung valuable lessons about the real-world challenges that face the Mammoth cloning project.
Cloning coyotes was actually a first step towards bringing back the mammoth. The mammoth and the Indian elephant are quite far apart. It's a hurdle that we have to overcome in the future to bring back the mammoth using the Indian elephant.
This was good news for Suam. But getting a skin cell from a coyote is simple. Finding a surviving mammoth cell is far more ambitious. Across the world in Boston, North America, there's a man who thinks he can bring back the mammoth without the need for an intact cell. Instead, he plans to genetically modify a modern elephant and turn it into a kind of mammoth. Professor George Church at Harvard Medical School is one of the world's leading geneticists. He's at the cutting edge of research into curing genetic diseases in humans.
It is a bit like science fiction to read genomes, including human genomes as well as extinct genomes, has improved by about 3 million-fold over the last decade.
George's strategy goes like this. Take the genome of the modern elephant and add mammoth genes for features like hair and extra fat. Then insert that new genome into an elephant egg, and a mammoth-like creature, not a pure clone, would be born. George's team of bright young geneticists are already working on modifying the elephant genome.
This is taking a sci-fi idea and bringing it into the lab.
When you tell someone, they always think back to Jurassic Park.
We're not just trying to create a hairy elephant. I'm bringing back the woolly mammoth. Yeah.
Inserting pieces of mammoth DNA into the elephant genome was impossible until 2013. That's when George began using a new invention for editing genes called CRISPR.
But boy, CRISPR made a huge difference.
CRISPR makes the fast and accurate modification of genomes possible.
It works by searching through the genomes and finding that one needle in a haystack place to make a cut and change the DNA precisely.
With the arrival of CRISPR, mammoth DNA can be inserted into the exact place on an elephant genome to make the elephant hairier, fatter, and more mammoth-like.
We're just giving it the target, it goes in, cuts the genome, and then we go in with a Band-Aid.
Now we can do all the changes that we want in the elephant to actually reintroduce the mammoth genome and actually come up with something that is really mammoth-like.
So what would George change about Emily the elephant to turn her into a mammoth?
Start with the features most likely to have an impact on cold resistance, red blood cells, and the hemoglobin.
The most important change George would make is adding the DNA for cold-resistant hemoglobin. Next, he would need to make the elephant chubbier for further cold protection.
Subcutaneous fat, which is going to be on the order of 10 centimeters.
Then the fur. George's genetically modified elephant could not survive the cold without its fur coat.
The hair, which will include longer strands and woolly components. The end result of all this genome engineering will be an animal that will have many components that are shared with the Asian elephant, but most of the functioning and appearance of a very cold-resistant woolly mammoth. Pretty much like this one here.
George's plan to modify the elephant to make it more mammoth-like is not just about fur and fat. He will also need information about diet and the digestive system that can only be found in mammoths like this one. And right now, Tori and Dr. Bastiaan Wintermans from the VU University Amsterdam are up to their elbows searching for the evidence. Finding ancient feces is the only way the team can discover what our mammoth ate.
How would you describe this?
You get used to it.
You do get used to it,
It's a very
amazingly.
typical odor.
The mammoth, who they now fondly call Buttercup, is starting to stink.
I really, really want to kind of do that to my nose right now, and I can't.
When we first started, it was digging, getting all the dirt out. And after a while, I started realizing that maybe, yes, there is something inside. It's a flat intestine. For me, that's very good. That's more than I hoped for.
Bastiaan is in luck.
They think they may have found feces, and the microbiologists are very excited. They're crowding in, it's like, I want a bit.
An uncontaminated piece where nobody touched it, so I'm going to pull it a little bit open. This is heaven for me.
Microbiologist heaven, the stomach contents of a mammoth.
Yes.
With feces samples, the microbiologists on the team can also identify the bacteria that lived inside this mammoth 40,000 years ago. Information that is crucial to the rebirth of the mammoth.
There's a whole ecosystem in your intestines that are helping us, everybody, elephants, mammoths, to digest our food. They're a really, really vital part of how the animal's biology works, and you're never going to be able to recreate a mammoth successfully if you don't understand those aspects of its biology as well.
Feces can contain a surprising amount of information.
If you pick it apart, there are sort of fibrous things inside, which could be sort of blades of grass that have been chewed up and are in there. So it's kind of exciting, because if it is some plant matter in there, that will tell us something about what the mammoth was eating.
The mammoth's diet included grass and flowers like buttercups and dandelions. Their dung, full of seeds, helped to maintain a grassland ecosystem. But as the mammoth herds disappeared, the grassland turned to mossy Arctic tundra, which, as temperatures rise and the moss rots, is now starting to release the potent greenhouse gas, methane. George Church believes that bringing mammoths back could repair the environment and help combat global warming.
The tundra ecosystem has more carbon at risk from melting than all of the rainforests of the world put together. Mammoths were and could be a key component in resisting that.
The scientists might be able to recreate the Last Supper of this mammoth, but how old was she when she ate it? The answer could lie in her teeth. Mammoths and elephants have similar teeth. They chomp their food with molars. As they wear them out through their life, the molars are replaced 6 times. When the last set wears out, they starve and die.
So what we have here are almost all of the mammoth's teeth. One of them is still over there in the carcass. We've got the 2 upper teeth, and this is the lower jaw. And one side, like this. That's where the chin would be. By looking at them, I can immediately see that it was on its last set of teeth. And that tells us straight away that it must have been at least 30 years old or so. But by looking at them again and seeing how much the teeth have been worn, we can go a bit further and say how much older than 30 it was. So here on the lower jaw, we're probably about halfway through the wear pattern, which is interesting because compared to the upper jaw, the teeth here seem much more worn, and it creates a kind of a problem with getting an accurate age. So the best thing to say really is possibly this animal was somewhere in their 50s. Now, when you look back at the upper teeth, you can start to understand what's going on. This tooth here has got something wrong with it. If you look at the enamel plates, you can see they go from being quite horizontal to twisting around, curving around the back, and that's not normal. They should be straight the whole way. And it means that they're not aligned in the way they need to be to have a really efficient shearing mechanism. If they're not perfectly aligned, that's probably going to create a problem with its feeding. It's very possible that this animal was not in tip-top condition at the end of its life.
Through the autopsy, the life story of our mammoth is revealing itself. It might not have been a story with a happy ending, but can she be given life once again by the science of cloning? Task expert Dan Fisher arrives back at his lab in Michigan. He hopes to piece together more facts about the mammoth's life with the scanner data from Siberia.
You made our 3 scans into 1 or something close.
Dan is looking for changes in the speed the tusks grew during the mammoth's life.
Females grow their tusks once they get into their calf-bearing years at rates that are very much dependent on where they are in a calving cycle.
I'm just looking at a slice that's going down the axis, basically. Mm-hmm. You can definitely see individual ears pretty clearly here.
That's gorgeous right there.
As tusks grow more slowly when a female mammoth is pregnant and lactating, Dan hopes to figure out how many times our mammoth became a mother.
When I saw the graph for this animal, I was extremely relieved. This is excellent. It was a graph that almost cried out at you, here's what's happening. Here are the different phases of my life. And that was wonderful to see. So I think we've got 1 calf, a second, a third, a fourth. What we've observed in the life history we've extracted from this animal's tusk is quite a number of years of active reproduction, 1 calf after another. This is one little hiccup in the record, and provisionally interpreted as a calf that was born. There's a full 2-year gestation period, but then the calf died.
With 2 years in the womb and 2 years before weaning, mammoths, like elephants, can produce a calf only every 4 years.
Probably about 8 successful calving events, perhaps 1 calf lost, maybe to predation. So she was quite a prolific mother. And then this period where everything goes flat.
Right.
And that's a post-reproductive menopausal period.
Okay.
She could be, for instance, the herd matriarch. She's very important for guiding the younger members of her family unit.
The autopsy is bringing us closer than ever before to this mammoth that lived 40,000 years ago. But what promise will the tissue samples hold for cloning when they get to South Korea? After months of delay caused by Russian customs, the tissue samples from the mammoth finally arrive in South Korea.
When I looked at them under the microscope, I first had very high expectations that this would actually give us something that's never been found before.
In-sung wants to find surviving cells with their nuclei intact.
It's actually looking quite promising. I think we can actually extract some of the DNA out of the sample because it seems like there's presence of nuclei in the samples.
It's a great start. Early analysis shows some of the longest fragments of mammoth DNA ever found, but not yet the complete genome. Over the next 2 years, thousands more samples will be analyzed.
You know, there is a possibility of finding something that's amazing. We are very hopeful that this mammoth can give us an accurate genomic map that we can use as a template in the future to possibly bring back the mammoth.
But in case they don't find it, there's always George Church's Plan B. And even though it is only happening in the test tube, he has already made the first step on his journey to bringing back the mammoth.
We've introduced now a few mutations that are relevant to adaptation to cold climate of blood.
Thanks to the work of scientists like Roy Weber, who has identified the segment of DNA that produces mammoth hemoglobin, George and his team have successfully synthesized it in the lab and inserted it into the elephant genome. It's the first crucial step towards his genetically modified mammoth.
And then we'll move on to hair, and then we'll move on to fat. And then once we're really sure that the genome represents all of the traits are performing as we would like, then we will start looking for a possibility of making a baby.
George has hopes of massive herds of mammoths returning to the northern latitudes.
The size of the herd that might be valuable for maintaining the tundra, it could be on the order of 100,000. This is another bit of science fiction that could become fact faster than we can imagine.
With the acceleration in technology, George's vision of thousands of mammoths roaming Siberia and Alaska is looking less like science fiction with every passing day. And it's an ambition that is only made possible by the genetic contribution of mammoths like this one.
We've got an elderly mammoth, probably a bit weakened from not feeding properly. She's got some tooth abnormalities, which may have also meant that she wasn't able to chew her food correctly, which may have meant she was bringing in things into her digestive tract, like stones and things like that, which may have also been affecting her health.
While the lumps found in her liver could have been bile stones, her strangely shaped teeth could explain the presence of pebbles in her stomach. But a final enigma remains. What happened during her last hours on Earth?
She's walking through a landscape in the summertime and comes across a peat pool or bog or swamp.
Maybe the animal want to drink some water and try to go to this peat. It was quite a swampy zone, and she was stuck and tried maybe to get back while the hind part was staying much higher. And finally, of course, predators like wolves, like cave lions, wolverines, they noticed that the animal cannot escape from this trap, come and start to eat.
Was she still alive?
For my opinion, alive. Yeah, so they start to eat like hyenas from the hind part of the body. Yes.
And you found tooth marks on the bones?
Skin was not cut by knife, an example. It
so
was
it's been
eaten.
torn?
Yes.
So she died a rather gruesome death.
Was eaten alive.
Her death might have been brutal, but she was successful in life. She was a prolific mother with 8 calves. And even though she faced disease and feeding difficulties in later life, she had been a matriarch leading her herd, dying at nearly 60 years of age. Although she is dead and gone, one day her genes might form the basis of a resurrected mammoth.
Ну, я, конечно, думаю, что, надеюсь, что мамонта смогут клонировать, клон этого животного. И я жду встречи с ней.
Putting a date on the return of the mammoth is difficult, but the rapid advances in technology could mean mammoth babies arriving sooner rather than later.
Everything has gone way, way faster than anybody expected. In 1 year, we went from an idea to a technology, so it's been quite exciting.
If the cloning technology can someday clone a mammoth, then maybe it's the peak of what you can actually achieve with this technology. It's pretty much our end goal. There's a lot of people who would love to have the mammoth come back. Yeah.
Whether this mammoth can be brought back or not, she will have a lasting legacy.
It's really rather wonderful that we can tell the story of just one individual mammoth that lived 40,000 years ago.